Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Kemau to Cape Palmer, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, hey, in diaspora, foreign affairs, reliable information, history, talking about culture, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another session of Focus on Liberia on the Marketplace. I am your host, Gabriel Carter. Wherever you are, thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're going to be very brief today because, as you can see, I am actually alone. So maybe 30, 45 minutes we want to talk about. Today about the central bank audit, but not specifically to go too in depth of the report itself, but what a central bank is, what it ought to do, what it's supposed to do. And I know sometimes that varies from country to country. And so it could, slightly vary from country to country. At the end of the day, what we want to do, maybe answer one question here: how is the Central Bank of Liberia, different from the other, central bank around the world, right? Whether we're doing what we're supposed to do, what the central bank's supposed to do, or if we're not. And the reason why I wanted to take a look at this is because, as somebody who work in banking at the higher level, have over a decade of that experience working different areas of banking. When this report came out, I think I was not bit taken aback, but I thought it was actually absurd that for a country in this post-war democracy, that experiment that we're having, that we kind of have these kind of lapses, especially as the most important institution of the country. So I was appalled a little bit, but I think I'm even more appalled because of some of the misconception that we're seeing in the social media verse in terms of what a central bank's supposed to do, not just in the discussion point, but also if you look at, even the government doesn't know what a central bank's supposed to do, right? And you don't have to take that from me. You can look at the report. That audit report is very damning in its entirety. So in addition to the government not knowing what it's supposed to do, the fact that we're not even talking about this, and what we're seeing in the social media in terms of what a central bank is and what it ought to do, it's kind of a, when you look at those, so as somebody who works in finance, and you look at that, you kind of cringe your teeth. But for the entirety of this conversation, what we want to do is just forget the report itself. What we want to do is give you a basic overview of what a central bank is and what a central bank is supposed to do, right? At least you have that what we call fundamental or gross knowledge about it. It doesn't have to be at the expert level. Then you can take that assessment now with that knowledge and go look at the report and reread the report, right? And hopefully you're able to glean as much from it as everybody else. But again, thank you for joining us. We have some slides here that we'll be going through. Wherever you are, just take a moment, share, invite your friends to join it as we go through this. All right. Just give me 1 second here. Let me do this. While I'm doing this, you can grab yourself a cup of water, coffee, tea, whatever it is you drink for the next 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Let me drop this link uh, in the chat here for voila. On a fini. All right, vamos, let's go. All right, so as I said, we want to talk about the central bank. Let's get into it. So let's get into the slides. So at least it'll guide us into this whole process, right? Um, so as I said, we're going to be brief. There are few questions we want to answer. What is a central bank? As I said earlier, we want to know the fundamentals of a central bank. What is the role of a central bank, in steering the economy of the country? We want to look at the central bank in its entirety is the monetary arm of the of the country. So we want to know what is that monetary arm, right? And sometimes those of us in finance and with finance and economics background, when we speak, we kind of use these elaborate terms and jargons, right? And we just throw them out there without even giving them, breaking them down to allow people to understand. So we will, what is monetary policy? We're going to talk about that, right? And as I said earlier, is the next question, the last question is, how is the Central Bank of Liberia different from other central bank, right? So once we are able to go through the material, we can now draw that conclusion to be able to determine, how what we do at the CBL differs from what other central banks do, right? All right. So for those of you who don't, and these are just a few of them. There's a elaborate and an extensive list of the role of a central bank, right? They are the lender of last resort. They're responsible for financial stability. They're also responsible for the controller of credit within the market. We will talk a little bit about that. Hopefully we have time to talk about that, because that is very important. And again, as I said, the monetary policy, which encompasses everything else that we're talking about now, right? It is the bank to the government. The government keeps their account with the central bank, right? They also oversee, in our case, oversee the debt of the country. They are also responsible for, foreign exchange, right, within the country, setting the exchange rate. Perfect example was, you can look at the case of Nigeria right now of what's happening. I think either Somalia or Ethiopia is having the same problem as well, but we'll talk about that later. They also supervise the commercial banks within the country. And again, last but not least, they they regulate the currency within the country in terms of how much money the bank can create, which they intend will have that ability to print, right? Banks create money, central bank does the printing. I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but hopefully I will be able to break it down and make sense of that later on. So let's talk about the lender of last resort, right? So lender of last resort, meaning the central bank supposed to act as the ultimate source of fund for banks facing liquidity problem. Liquidity problem just mean that. So let me explain this a little. Every bank operate on what we call the fractional reserve system, meaning for every dollar that you, myself, or anyone deposit at the bank, that bank has its own reserve ratio requirement. So in our case, I think for if you deposit, when I mean our case, the Central Bank of Liberia as of 2022, if you deposit $1, the bank is, the commercial banks are allowed to keep 25 cents of that and lend out 75 cents, right? That 75-cent portion that they're supposed to lend gives them the liquidity. They're supposed to have liquidity, meaning they have money to lend, right? In this case, if a bank is actually struggling, let's say it is having insolvency problem where they are not able to take in enough deposit, meaning in our case in Liberia, where most people don't put their money in a bank, banks might be have a lot of banks have liquidity problem. And I've argued this plenty of time on different shows, right? In this case, if they're having that kind of problem, then their last resort is, again, the lender of last resort. They go to the lender of last resort, which is the central bank, right? They go to the central bank and say, hey, we're not having, we cannot meet our depositors' needs, because people deposit money into taking money, right? All right. Then the central bank can lend to them what we call the interbank lending rate. It's different from the rate you and I use, we borrow from the commercial banks, right? Uh, I would throw this in there as well. Banks supposed to be able to lend from each other. So let's say if you're a small bank, you have the ability to lend from a bigger bank that has enough liquidity. So if you're having liquidity problem, you can go to a bigger bank that has enough liquidity. They will lend to you at their own rate, which will now help you shore up your liquidity problem. But in our case, I don't think that is even there because I don't think we have that kind of a well-capitalized banking system. But that's a different country. So they're supposed to be, long story short, they're supposed to be the lender of last resort, meaning the central bank supposed to be the last place commercial banks supposed to go um, uh, to borrow, right? Now, let's go to the next step here. Let me throw this out there before we even go. So in our case, right, where let's say we have a bank that is struggling in Liberia and they go to and this is where the game theory probably part comes in, right? And where sometimes you just have to let capitalism take over. So let's say you have a bank, Morovia uh, commercial bank. Let's say that is your bank you have in Liberia, right? And you're having a liquidity problem. You go to the central bank and say, hey, I'm not having a lot of depositors coming in, but we have a lot of withdrawal happening and we don't have enough liquidity here. The first thing the central bank is going to think is, well, it has to be either a regulatory problem, either you're not managing the bank correctly. But let's say fast forward, the biggest question that they're going to ask the CEO of Morovia Commercial Bank, which is your bank, will be, um, you know, what they're going to ask themselves is how important is Morovia Commercial Bank to the economy, right? How important is Morovia Commercial Bank to the economy for us to be able to save it, right? If we do intend do want to save it, right? How important is it that we will want to save it, right? And if that determination can
Hey,
come in,
Gabriel, can you hear me?
yes, Larry, welcome. Thank you for joining. Yeah, thank you. Let me just land on this part, and I'll let you go. Um, so in this case, they could determine whether your bank, the Morovia Commercial Bank, is more important in terms of
One second. Let me just tweak something over here.
how much
Okay,
bank
good.
you have, how many depositor you have, how interconnected it is. If not, they don't. If they deem it not very important, they could just let it fail because it's not too important. If it fails, they don't have any. It won't have any bigger impact on the economy. So that's the lender of last resort. So let me stop on there. And Larry, thank you for joining. So before you came on, I was, what I wanted us to do today, and we can maybe extend it, is to, I'm sure you're aware of the central bank audit report that came out. And as I said earlier, it is what's been happening is that I don't think people understand what a central bank's supposed to do, right? When I meet people in terms of the social media, but most importantly, the government doesn't understand what the role of the bank is, especially as of a central bank. And the evidence of that is the governors, the prime governors that have been taking over the bank and how they have been mismanaging, and now to bring us to this current report. So what I wanted us to do today is to give a bigger, you know, maybe class here in terms of what a central bank is, what it's supposed to do. And then from that knowledge, we can now take that and compare it to what happened at the central bank. And hopefully people can walk away from here with something educational. Yeah. So again, thank you for taking the time for joining us. Right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
man. I thought it was going to be, and my wife thinks that I have COVID. I don't have COVID. I have a cold. they try, they trying to isolate me already, throw me in the basement closet or something.
Yeah.
You know, I just have a
I
little
think I
sore
think you did
throat.
something else.
Yeah,
But we the
but
one to throw you in
like,
the basement.
but when you posted that you wanted to talk about this, I said, okay, this is important. I need to hop on with my man Gabriel because he's a banker as well,
Yeah.
and we need to talk about this because I think this is like one of the main reasons why Liberia isn't developing,
Yeah.
because with all of the resources and all of this stuff, Liberia is just not developing at the pace
Mhm.
that they should be.
Mhm.
So I said, well, let me just, take a little bit of orange juice, come and sit with my Gabriel. Let's rap about this thing today, brother. So we need to talk
Yeah.
about this, brother.
Perfect. And again, I know you've been, like you said, you've been very busy. So again, welcome back, and hopefully you'll be consistent on here. But yeah, let's jump into this. So um, hopefully I can share this again and we can go over that. So uh, you know, let me see. Let me go back here. So I highlighted here the role of a central bank, which are some of the stuff that I highlighted here, which are the first one I just talked about, lender of last resort. They're responsible for financial stability, the controller of credit within the economy, uh, monetary policy, which is encompasses everything they do. We talked about they also are the banker, the the bank to the government, meaning they host hold the government deposit account, banking account, uh, and they also are responsible for foreign exchange management, supervision of banks, currency regulation. I mean, the list goes on. But these are the basic that I have here. But I think I've already went through this. So the next one here on the list here is the monetary policy. So I will just talk briefly about this, and then we can just go off of what's here. So monetary policy, as I said, it encompasses everything the central bank does. On the fiscal side, that's the Minister of Finance, the Ministry of Finance, right? And then on the monetary policy side, the monetary policy side is everything that the central bank does, right? Which is some of the lists that we talked about. So the monetary policy, and I think this is arguably the most important role of the central bank in terms of maintaining a stable exchange rate, promoting credit exchange. They're pretty much the monopoly, the only entity that can actually supply the supply of the currency, uh, and they also promote growth in the economy by trying to attain full employment. So, given this role, Larry, and what you have seen happen in the report, you know, what do you think? How do you think this responsibility and what happened in the report differs from what we're doing at this CBL? You know, from the
Yeah.
monetary
So
policy side, right?
yeah. So I mean, functions of I want to say modern central bank.
Mhm.
Is meant to kind of stabilize the economy, make
Right.
sure you have low inflation. Like in the U.S., the Federal Reserve Bank tried to keep inflation like around 2.25 percentage point, right? There's a reason for that, because over a long period of time, over a long study, they felt that 2.25% inflation is good for the economy because it still leads a little price increase, doesn't hurt because it also incentivizes companies to manufacture and produce more, hire more people. The central bank is also meant to make sure we have full employment, right? I mean, the act that established the Central Bank of Liberia was following the same model of the U.S. Federal Reserve System. Now, we know the U.S. Federal Reserve System, the concept of it came from Alexander Hamilton, who, if you're in New York, he's actually buried at the intersection of Wall Street and Broad Street. There's a church right there called Trinity Cathedral. That's where he's buried. And there's the guy who died at a very early age over in, I think it was Fort Lee, New Jersey. He's the founder of the U.S. Central Bank was actually shot by a sitting vice president of the United States. Because they went for a duel. Alexander Hamilton used to criticize, I think his name was Byrd, used to criticize them a lot in his writings. And back in the day, they would challenge you to a duel. And that's how Alexander Hamilton ended up. He didn't expect to, he didn't shoot back, but they said, the way he twisted, that's how he got shot. So the whole concept came from Alexander Hamilton. We can go all the way back to England and say it came from, but Alexander Hamilton came up with the concept because the Central Bank of England came up, they were actually formulated a lot later. So major countries around the world, they all have central bank. Germany, they have the Deutsche Bundesbank, right? Sweden, they have the Riksbank. All these countries, they have the same concept of central bank. The problem with Liberia, when things come to Liberia, I don't know, Gabriel, something, there must be something in the water. But you can take things that are working so well everywhere else. Central bank is out there making personal loans. Is beyond me. How is buying things and paying for things that it shouldn't be? Central banks should not be involved in. These are things that commercial banks should be doing. How can you make, it was so bizarre to see they're making uncollateralized loans to individuals, even if they work within the bank. That is not a justification to give them loans, right? Not unless they're tapping into like a 401k or something and they're borrowing from the 401k, but you have the 401k to use as a payback or something, because you don't take all of the money and give it out to them. But when Patriot came in and he made the statement that he was going to follow the whims or follow everything that President Weah says for the central bank, I knew right away that this is not a real central bank. Central Bank of Liberia is operating like a real central bank, right? Because the president shouldn't dictate the monetary policies that you just explained of a central bank. It was so bizarre, but that's what they've been doing, Gabriel. Mills Jones did something similar when he was making loans to market women as a means to promote himself when he was planning to run for president. They do things in the central bank that they should not be doing. So the audit report just kind of revealed that the Central Bank of Liberia is not being used as a central bank, but it's more, in fact, was being used as some sort of a slush fund, right?
That's exactly the word.
You know what I mean? Where people go in to borrow money, people go in to take loans, and that money is not just being manufactured out of thin air. This is the country's money that somebody is going to be on the hook for to pay back. It's so bizarre, and let me just say this thing before you move on to the next topic or before we expand on this. This is going to be a test of President Boycott to see
that's a great point.
He's going to follow the rule of law, bring in a Ministry of Justice, do some real serious asset recovery, and chase these people down to recover the people's money. This is going to be a test, a truth test. I think he stumbled. I think the president stumbled when he suspended the CBL governor, because nowhere in the CBL Act does it say the president can suspend the CBL governor. Even back on August 8th, President Trump over here made a former President Trump made a statement that he wanted to change policies and be able to tell the Federal Reserve Bank when to lower interest rate.
Yeah,
I see you laugh
yeah,
because you know that's
yeah,
nonsense.
yeah.
Everybody criticized him. They said this guy is bizarre. Everybody criticized him because, like Jerome Powell came out and said, there's a reason why the legislators want central or Federal Reserve banks to be independent.
Independent. Yeah,
Yeah, because otherwise, when presidents want to boost their chances of being elected, they will lower interest rate
yeah.
to heat up the economy,
And then
and you can't have people doing that. So firing a central bank governor or suspending them, it kind of put the CBL governor. Um, it's like warning shots that hey, if you don't listen to the president, he
you're
or
going
she
to, yeah, you're
will
gonna get rid
suspend
of
you.
you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so bizarre how things operate in Liberia, man. You don't see this kind of things anywhere else.
So since you brought up that point, let me ask you this one question, and then we can get to the next one. What do you think about the current governors firing? Supposedly, was it firing or arrest of three of the CBL staff who supposedly transferred 900,000 to IB Bank, which was the bank at which he was a CEO before he got appointed at CBL. So he arrested three central bank staff. I don't know if it was him or uh, the president or so, who at the time worked at the central bank, but they transferred 900,000 to IB Bank, and they were supposedly arrested for that. What do you think about that? That whole story, in terms of the way I think maybe I didn't frame the question. The way I look at it is you're a CEO at IB Bank. You were there when those funds were transferred. That quantum of money, there's no way Larry cannot be aware that that money is coming in. So you should know about that money coming in and what is being intended for, what is being used for at the time you were the CEO. But now that you take over the central bank, you arrested those three individuals that fired. Does that incriminate you to a certain degree for lack of, oversight in terms of what is coming into your bank and what is leaving? Or do you think it's that whole arrest is a distraction from the bigger aspect of this audit report? I know it's a long.
Well, it certainly exposes him to financial mismanagement when he was at the
Mhm,
previous bank because he should have. If you don't know that a large amount of money is leaving your bank,
mhm,
then you don't deserve to be the CEO of that bank because that's absolute nonsense, right?
mhm,
Especially in a small country like that. I can understand in a large financial institution like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, well, these major banks,
yeah,
you still have things in place, but there's no way. And this whole business about going out to arrest people, I mean, I don't
agree.
understand how these guys can just have the audacity, have the kahunas to go and do these things. But
Yeah,
you know what? What if the president give the minister of justice the leeway? Let the
yeah,
minister of justice go and do some background, invest this thing in its totality,
mhm,
investigate it. Because I'm telling you, man, there's sort of economic malfeasance that you see taking place in the country. It is so brazen. And you know why, Gabriel? They
mm.
do that stuff because tell me the last time someone got arrested and was in prison for doing something like this. You
It's, yeah,
you can't
never.
think of another time that it actually happened where somebody did something like this and they were actually charged, prosecuted, and imprisoned. I can't think of another time that it ever happens. And
It's
that's
never
not what this
happened.
central
Yeah,
bank is,
yeah.
you know?
Perfect. Thank you. And let's go on to the next topic here, which is and I have a good example for this one. Um, so financial stability, there's a lot that encompasses, but I just had 2 points here. Meaning the bank is responsible for taking the regulatory measure with, I think you just alluded to that, with respect to money, in terms of money supply. And again, as I said earlier, uh, banks create money via securities, which prompts the central bank to print money based on the supply and demand, right? So that's central bank is responsible for that, that determining, the stability of the economy via that. And they also control the foreign exchange market to ensure stability in the financial system. So the example that I wanted to give is perfect one that is playing out in West Africa right now, Nigeria, right? I think there's two countries, either Ethiopia as well. Ethiopia, I think either Ethiopia or Somalia, one of those two. The central bank, before the IMF gave them the loan, they told them to float their currency, right? Meaning they took it from it being fixed, which we currently have. We have our own exchange rate fix or whatever. They told them to float it as a condition to get the loan. Nigeria just did the same thing, and they're having a nightmare of a of a monetary policy crisis right now that is happening in the country. And the central bank is responsible for that, in terms of ensuring financial stability. Again, as I said, by regulating the money supply and also the exchange rate. What do you think about our money supply strategy as a country, as it being fixed right now? Currently, this is what we have because it's not determined by supply and demand. It's fixed right now. What do you think of it? Do you think that is one of our strengths in terms of something that the central bank is doing right? Because
So you think, excuse me.
Yeah.
So the problem you have, since the whole Bretton Woods thing fell apart, because like back in, so at one time, currency was actually backed by gold.
Correct.
Right? People needed to have gold, which like the universal currency to back the currency.
Mhm.
But today, since Richard Nixon came in, and he did away with the whole Bretton Woods thing,
Gold standard, yeah.
the gold standard, money itself is not backed by anything except when you look on money, it was say backed by the true faith of the U.S. government.
Right.
It's just based on trust. As a result, because it's not really backed by anything. As a result,
Right.
people tend to play around with the supply of currency.
Right.
They tend to play around with it. Liberia, if you look at the most recent, I don't know if it's a CBL report or the recast budget that's coming out.
There is. Yeah. This is recast budget.
If you read the first page of that recast budget, there is a statement out there that says the money supply has increased. They said there's more money in circulation right now. The money supply has increased. And you know what is an increase in money supply? It leads to inflation, right? Meaning prices are going to go up because there's a lot of money chasing fewer goods.
If there is not in the compensating production within the economy to counter that, right?
That is correct. Yeah. Because the other way to lower inflation is to boost productivity, like you just said, Gabriel, is to increase production. By increasing production and supply of those goods or services, you lower inflation. But Liberia, they are printing money, putting it in circulation without doing a very good job of taking out old money or explaining why they're putting more money in circulation. Mm-hmm. The currency, saying that the currency is fixed, I think they're even manipulating. Just my belief. This is not FOL. This is not. I'm just basing it on what I've seen over the years. Mm-hmm. I think they're actually manipulating the rate between the LRD and the USD, because I've seen instances. I've studied this for a while. I've seen instances where it's called a DXY when you trade US currency. I've seen the currency of the US government strengthen against major currencies, against the euros, the yen, the Deutsche Mark, all these other currencies, including the Central African franc, Nigeria, the naira. But when it comes to Liberia, it doesn't move at all. How is that possible? How can the US currency strengthen against major economies, against the largest economy in Africa, Nigeria, against Ghana, the CD, the Leons, all these other currencies, but then you look at Liberia, LRD, the US dollar doesn't move against it. So that kind of tells me they have some formula in there that they're just sticking to no matter what is happening in the international market. So I don't trust the CBL when it says that the currency is trading at, let's say, 191 or 192 to 1 USD. It
Yeah.
may even be more higher if they allow it to truly, truly, truly float,
Yeah.
right? But they don't do that. The other thing you mentioned is I'm very cautious when I listen to the IMF giving advice
Yeah.
in terms of what to do with your currency or what to do with your economy, because the IMF is not well known for giving. They don't offer evidence
Yeah.
in terms
Evidence.
of why they're
Recommendation.
proposing some of the solutions they're proposing. And this came
Right.
from
Right.
former economists at the IMF
Right.
who said, I think there's an article I read recently where I don't know if it's the Ghanaian, I think it's a couple of professors in Ghana was advising the government to be careful in terms of listening to the IMF when it gives advice on what the Ghanaians should do in terms of their fiscal and monetary policies.
Yeah.
So I think the CBL is playing around with the numbers when it comes to the LRDs. But one thing I read in that report, there's an increase in the money supply,
Mhm.
which means prices are definitely a little bit higher in Liberia than
Yeah.
it was about a year ago.
Yeah. Percy, welcome. We're talking about we're just trying to talk about, give a basic understanding of central banks, what they do in general, what the roles of central bank is, uh, in a general term, and how that compares to what we do at the Central Bank of Liberia as well. So let me make this point, and I will bring you in. So I agree with you, and I think one of it- you're right. Our currency strategy, exchange rate strategy, is fixed. We're one of the few countries that have adopted that. Most countries in Africa do the fixed exchange rate, meaning they have a floor and a ceiling of where it can go. So determining what is uh, being, they can play with it based on what is happening within the economy. So let's say if the prices are going up, you can determine to, you know, bring it up or bring it down, right? So in this case, it is not really based on the supply and demand within the economy, right? And the point that I wanted to make here, which I think it is hurting us as well, and this is why the IMF make these recommendations before they give out loan to Nigeria, or I think it's Somalia. I think it's Somalia. I forgot. I just listened to that podcast. Is because in that case, in this fixed strategies, right, where you determine the exchange rate, there's two things that can happen. One, if Larry has 100 million, he wants to go invest in Liberia, he can bring that money in there. But because Larry is operating in a country that has a fixed exchange rate, where this governor can come in and say, hey, I want to, that 100 million, you can lose maybe quarter of it by somebody just playing with by reducing or increasing the exchange rate, right? Just like that,
Yeah, yeah,
without you even doing any and making a one mistake in your investment strategy, you've just lost half of your money, right? And I think this is also hurting us in a way because it is stopping investors from bringing their money in. In that case, if it's floated, you can bring your 100 million in to invest. You pocket in Liberia Bank. What you can do, you can buy a swap derivative, maybe for another 2 million or 5 million, to protect yourself against the interest rate volatility based on the supply and demand. But in our case, because it's fixed, you can put up 100 million in our economy. You cannot do anything to that because I can just get up one morning and say, hey, the prices are too high, and deflate the exchange rate, and you can just lose maybe a quarter or even half of your money while while you're laying in bed, right? So I think that is one of the things that's hurting us, and I think this is why the IMF, before they give out these loans to these countries, they make them float their currency where they have no
yeah.
control over it, just based on supply and demand. Um, yeah. Percy, welcome, my man. Thank you for joining. Let me give you a quick recap of what we're talking about. Maybe you can, and then, all right. So, uh, these are the roles of the central bank we're talking about, what they do. There's a whole lot of them, but these are the one we want to focus on, right? So we're currently on financial stability. I think Larry just talked about, um, the our exchange rate being fixed and the consequences of that. And I just gave, you know, I just, added to what he said as well. Um, any thoughts before we get into the next point?
Um,
The next point will be a control of credit. Okay.
no,
Or yeah,
I think Larry is better placed here to talk about this issue also. So I
yeah.
won't try to bore the listening audience with what you guys have already talked about. So we can just pick up from where we are and then
Yeah. So what
continue.
we're trying to do once we talk about a point, we give a fundamental, base of what it's supposed to do from a central bank level. Then we'll also do take that point and now compare it to what is happening with the in Liberia central bank and what is specifically in the audit report. So let's go into the next topic. Larry, do you have a comment on this before we jump into the other one?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
Progressing nicely.
Okay, perfect. So the next topic here is the controller of credit. So meaning the central bank, as I think I said earlier, they control. I think Larry, you mentioned that earlier in terms of the money supply in the economy, right? Um, to serve the cash requirement for individual and businesses by rediscounting the T-bill, which is the way in which they lend to banks, right? This is indirect way of lending to commercial banks um, by discounting T bills. Let me maybe add a little bit more meat on that. What I mean, meaning the central banks lends to banks because we operate on a fractional reserve system. Meaning, if I deposit $1, in this case in Liberia, the bank can lend up to 75 cents and save the other 25 cents, right? Now, based on that liquidity within those commercial banks, they can now go and make credit, create security. In this case, let's say we are depositing, we're having deposit coming, we're supposed to lend on the strength of our deposit. But in this case, where you don't, you can go to the central bank, you know, and borrow from them, right? That's if they allow you to do that. Um, you know, so that's how they control credit within the economy. Let me give you guys a perfect example. Unless Larry, you want to come in?
No, no, no. Go ahead. Go
All
ahead.
right, let me just give a perfect example. So let's say using Larry again. Say Larry is one of the finest uh, consultant in the country, right? He's great at what he does, consulting with some of the biggest international banks, I mean, companies that come into the country or even in the region. He has a sprawling office in downtown Central Morovia, right? People coming in. He has his staff by, let's say, three three partners, two managers, and two assistants. Because of how great he is and the kind of business he's doing and the kind of money he's making, as a smart businessman, he said, you know what? I have a lot of international partners coming in. It takes them too long to get to Central Moravia. Let's open another office 20 minutes or 15 minutes away from the airport so they don't have to drive all the way into Central Moravia. So he goes to the bank, take out $1 million loan, pledge the new building that he's going to build as a collateral, pledge the other building that he has as collateral as well. So it's strength, they gave him that $1 million loan. What just happened, which is what we're going to talk about in terms of controller of credit, we just created money in the economy that wasn't there before, right? Because that bank now is going to take that security note that Larry just signed, which is 1 million that they lent to him for 12%, either go to another commercial bank and lend it, and borrow it, or in our case, go directly to the central bank and borrow that money, right? Larry isn't the only consultant in the country. There's thousands of other. There's people in construction, other service industry doing that. So that creates like the demand within the economy that now triggers the central bank to say, we have an economy that is heating up. Let's print more money. They can determine when to do that and when not to do that, based on the discount rate at which they lend it to the commercial bank. So in this case, the commercial bank will take they would take that security and borrow that money for 5% and lend it to Larry for say 12. So they just made a spread. So that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of the lender of the controller of credit within the economy, in terms of they can determine how much money they want to print based on those economic activity and how much not to print. Yeah. So that's the example I wanted to give. Based on that, how do you guys think as the country with the audit report, how do you guys think we are um, the central bank is doing in terms of how they control credit within the economy, if at all?
I mean, before you can even the central bank is not just a central bank; it's a research hub also, right? So
Right.
what we see in the United States here did not happen overnight. The federal funds rates was a lot of research. The Fed got to know that they can actually control the rates in the economy. That was quite recent. It's recent. When I say recent, monetary too.
Mhm.
It wasn't part of the central bank repertoire when the bank came when the bank became when the legislation was passed in 19 I think 13 or so for the central bank. So so in Liberia case, right, there's
Mhm.
not a lot of research that goes into understanding the Liberian economy, how it works, right, and then to formulate tools. Like you don't have to make it like what we have in America, but you can create your own tools. But to formulate tools, right, that you can use to regulate, like you said, credit and the broader
Mhm.
economy and whatnot to ensure that you. I don't know if we. The other time we did a show here where me and you talk about like inflationary economy, the people who are doing something else with the reserve requirement, right? We
Yep.
give
Yep.
them little or no money to lend out, right? It's an inverse relationship stuff they were doing there. So I don't know if there's a lot of research and R&D that go into enhancing the repertoire of the Central Bank of Liberia, because it should be happening, because
Mhm.
you should bring online new tools, and that would be able to regulate that's idiosyncratic to the Liberian economy. You don't have to do what we all are saying here, because from an American perspective, but you can craft your own tools, right? Study your economy, right? See what's worked, craft your own tools, see how best you can regulate your interest rate and credit into the market. See, so in the like you guys were talking, I'm sorry to go back, but in terms of financial stability, right?
Right.
The Fed have standing facilities there, and also have emergency facilities, right? That's another way. So in economic downturns, right, like we have here doing COVID and whatnot, these are the emergency facilities to the central bank, but while keeping credit in the American economy flowing, right? So
Mhm.
those are things that the Fed have come to realize here, that these are things that work. The Fed is a lender of last resort. They control credit, and if there is the amount of credit in the American economy is not up to what it is, people are struggling. The Fed literally steps in and provide credit and put money into the market. That's when you see them. Before, it used to be just government T-bills and whatnot. The Feds were buying, but now they're buying mortgage-backed securities, right? They're
Mhm.
buying loans, and when they're buying other things so that it can impact the long-term interest rate in the economy. So those are things that, like when you think about central bank, it's not just it's a bank, it's a bank, but it's also more like it's slash think tank, because you have to keep reinventing things that works in the economy, that makes the economy work
Mhm.
for the broader citizenry. I don't see that kind of activity at the central bank. I don't know if they're doing it. Matter of fact, I mean, the audit report even showed that there's nothing going on there, because of the fact that even operating as a commercial bank, and I don't know if they're doing the R&D. I don't know. I can't. I'm not sitting here and saying that it's not happening. But if it was happening, we should be
Mhm.
seeing these things coming online in the Liberian economy, right? It should be impacting the broader economy. But I don't know.
Yeah. Larry. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the question that I ask is from a control standpoint, and in a general sense of a central bank, and a control standpoint from in our case from the CBL, and you can loop in this report. How do you think, or if you even think at all, we are efficient in terms of how we control our credit? And to give you a perfect example, which you mentioned earlier, like you said, the money supply, like you said, when you read Eureka's budget, they said the money supply increased, right? Um, yeah. How do you think? What are the tools that some of the tools that you think we use to determine that, and what are those tools are effective?
So Percy is right in a
Right.
sense that you need a central bank that is innovative,
Mhm.
because you're not going to have all of the solutions to certain problems readily available. So you need some people there who would be innovative. I mean, the US Federal Reserve System started back in 1913. And by the time the Great Depression hit, like around August or so of 1929, people
Yeah.
criticized the US Federal Reserve Bank because they didn't react quickly. They didn't learn, right? But when you fast forward to the financial crisis that kicked off like around 2007, 2008,
Yeah.
when Lehman Brothers failed, the Fed now decided, oh, we're going to be more proactive and not wait for things to go crazy. As a result, they went out there, the Ben Bernanke, all these guys, and Larry Summers, Treasury, all these guys that went out there and started purchasing a lot of treasuries, right? And the reason you
Yeah.
do that, because that's one of the monetary policy that the Federal Reserve has to put
Yeah.
more currency in the economy, because there was a lack of credit that restrained the economy. When Lehman failed, I mean, shares in Lehman Brothers, these guys were like huge on Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
How can a big bank like this fail? So as a result, people just weren't lending. People were afraid to lend, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I was chasing people at Lehman Brothers, asking them, look, listen, you got maybe like 200-300 million of a 10-year bond. I need to
Yeah.
get that money back, right?
Yeah.
So I was chasing these guys, and because nobody else was lending to anyone, everyone was afraid. But the Fed stepped in with something new, a brand new concept. So Percy is right that you may not have all of the solutions, but you need to be innovative, right? The research part needs to be innovative.
Mhm.
The Central Bank of Liberia doesn't have that level of innovation. They just don't have it, because the way how you use reserve requirements, the way how you use treasuries to influence interest rates, because if you want to put more money in the economy, you go out and you purchase US treasuries, you give them cash and put more money. The T-bills, the CBL bills that we see out there, they don't work. Because at one time, when Madison leave back in 2012, 2013, right before Ebola hit, they printed a ton of currency, and a lot of money was in circulation, and they needed a way to pull that money out of circulation. So what they did was, this is when they came out with the CBL bills, right? They used CBL bills where the banks in Liberia subscribe to these CBL bills. By purchasing the CBL bills, they pull money out of the Liberian economy. So it worked for a little while, but that was new concept to them. Something that had been around in America for 100 years. They had just picked up on it because the CBL had been in power, had been around for, I think at the time, maybe 10 years or so. It was still relatively new. But all of the policy tools that the CBL needs, it's not effective. The funniest thing I ever saw the CBL do was, I saw the guy from LBDI and Samuel Twe at one time on a radio show pitching, when we had this whole notion about, Liberian currency, the whole missing, the 17 billion missing.
Yeah.
They were also trying to influence the Liberian public to invest in something called inflationary bills. Right? In the US, we call it TIPS, Treasury Inflationary Protected Securities. I saw these guys trying to discuss and sell it. I was laughing because it was so new to them. They didn't know how to really sell it to the public. So the CBL right now, all they're running on is the concept of what a central bank should be. But to Percy's point, I don't think they have the level of research, innovation, and policy tools to influence the Liberian economy. Because CBL saying that, we're going to set the benchmark rate at around, say, 12, 13%. Nobody pays attention to that nonsense. The banks don't follow that crap, because they have no way of influencing the economy. They can't go out and say, we're going to issue CBL bills and we're going to have a lot of people subscribing to it. It's just like when you look at the CBL annual reports, not just the annual reports, the quarterly reports, not a lot of people are actually purchasing CBL bills. It's not like that.
Yeah.
In the US, a person wanted to buy US government securities. Way back in the day, you had to go to a broker dealer. But if a person wanted to buy US, he goes to a site called Treasury Direct. You go to Treasury Direct, we can purchase US Treasury securities, 1,000, depending on what instrument we need. We don't have that innovation in Liberia. So we ought to reconceptualize or rethink how the CBL should operate. Talk to some of the people that have banking. You guys all over here, you got background in banking, finance, and all this stuff. Bring those people that around. Let them explain how a modern central bank should work. And then try to change it. But let me say this one thing before I swing it back to you, Gabriel.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No country has ever developed without strengthening the financial system. If you don't have a financial system where the central bank is actually meeting one of its functional requirements, and that is to regulate the banks, you're not going anywhere because people don't trust the banks in that country to put their money in there. I bet LBDI is probably insolvent. I bet they're insolvent, and we probably don't even know. Banks in America goes under constantly. What was the bank over in California that went under, man? What's not a bank?
Some kind of valley. I forget the name.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley.
Yes, you're on point right there, Percy, my brother. Yeah, these banks, the Federal Reserve Bank would step in and would take over these banks. We don't have the same level of control, and we never, ever, ever, ever going to develop our country if we don't strengthen the central bank and boost and strengthen the Liberian financial sector. We're not going anywhere. We're wasting our time.
To that point, let me ask you guys a question here, and I'm glad you actually brought that up. Do you think, do you guys think this is the failure of every president since this post-war democracy that we're experimenting with, that their failure to understand how important the central bank is or the financial system is, usually spell dooms for their policy as well? Because I think I don't think any president has come in with that intention from a policy standpoint in terms of really focusing on the financial system. By having that intention, that means you will appoint a real experienced individual who you will appoint at the central bank who can ensure that, which will in turn also help you strengthen your, help you fund some of your policy as well. Do you think this has been probably the biggest failure of the presidents because of their failure for, of lack of understanding of the how important our financial system is to any country's development? Or do you think there are other stuff in addition to that?
I think the Central Bank of Liberia started to falter. It was already just a frame, but it started to falter when you start to have these constant political interference into the bank's operation. So, for example, the legislature usurping powers for them to actually say before money gets printed, right? You start having this kind of political intrusion into an entity that is supposed to be independent as the central bank. Then you start to have all kinds of problems. I think on this show we discussed one time, I told you, I think one of the problems there also is the reason why this political interference is so much into the central bank, because the tenure are so short, right? The central bank tenure, one thing, right? The central bank, the board of governor and the executive governor tenure should be longer than a presidential term. When you look at the central bank term is just about the same as the presidential term. So it's tempting, right? It's very tempting so maybe next time, let's suppose CDC wins the next election in 2029. That's 2029, right? So let's suppose CDC wins in 2029. They come there, right? And they take a look around the scan and they will start purging. This guy will probably, the acting guy that's here now will be probably 5 years. He will just be about 5 years into his tenure, right? There's a temptation on CDC part to say, hey, my man, we want a man, or they start doing all kind of just what these guys are doing. They start to mess with the laws and do what they're doing and try to get themselves a new central bank governor or suspend the guy and bring new one, because there's a precedent and President Bouakai can suspend a central bank governor and bring somebody to be acting why by the law doesn't say that, right? So it's a temptation that one of the reasons that is because the tenure is too short. I think that statute needs to be revisited. At least the central bank board of governor tenure should be at least longer to provide some sort of stability. It should be at least, instead of 5 years, at least 10 years, so that it takes away that political incentives or temptation on the part of the president or whoever he advises or whoever they are, to just come and uproot a central bank governor willy-nilly. It's not supposed to be like that. I just from an institutional standpoint and from a stability standpoint, I think that's one of the things that we need to look at. So with the hierarchy in place, and you have these things in place where people cannot interfere with the central bank directly, like we are seeing right now, because this is unprecedented what President Walker is doing, right? Like we are seeing right now. That would always be a problem. Secondly, what was the second point I wanted to make about that? I'm drawing blank. Go ahead, Larry. I will come back to it.
Having a senior moment.
Yeah.
No, so that's a great question Gabriel just asked. One of the most important questions when it comes to the CBL. Is it a failure on the part of the people who have been in power over the I mean, I wish we could post that question to someone that people chime in, because Percy gave an excellent answer to that, right? Because the central bank's governor role has been influenced politically. And when you have politics playing a role in managing the economy, you're not going anywhere, because then you fall into that whole issue of why nations fail that people like Robinson and Acemoglu and all the guys have written about, because then you end up putting your kinsmen in charge. Because Talu, I don't believe, personal opinion, not FOL, I don't believe Talu was even qualified.
No, he wasn't. Look, I mean, that's why we here. We are expert. That's why they bring on this show here. The man wasn't qualified. Simple. It's okay to say, Larry.
He wasn't qualified to be a security guard at the CBL.
Nope.
But then the governor.
All right, come on, put some respect on Talu's name.
I know that. I'll be harsh on it.
No, go ahead.
Because he had a background, supposedly a background in compliance. But look at all of the compliant violations that took place on his watch.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be laughing like this. I gotta move on.
Yeah. So Talu, I think, was a disaster. And I think looking at the law, the act that created the central bank, President Boyka has a valid reason to remove him, except he's doing it the wrong way. You don't just go and pull him, go through the impeachment process, because it follows that section of the CBL Act that says you can remove somebody if they don't qualify, if they don't come from a finance and economic background, and he lacked the experience. But I think it's a failure on the part of the previous administrations of bringing people in to head the central bank who lacked the requisite experience, right? Because when Patriot came in, it was politics. He had been around for decades, He had been around for decades, but the very first statement he made that he was going to follow the whims of President Weah.
He went on
I was proud to write off the back.
On the Sagamo tree and said that.
That was nonsense. Well, he went on the Sagamo tree.
Did it really?
The man went to the party headquarters and even
You
West
kidding me?
you talking and said.
That right there was a disaster. So again, Gabriel asked a great question. Percy gave the best answer. If we want to change the way how Liberia is moving, we've got to put qualified people in qualified position. I don't know anything about medicine. If you tell me right now, you tell me right now, so Larry, that patient over there need a surgery. You probably be charging me a week from now for murder because I'll kill that person. I know nothing about medicine. That's not my area.
You'll be giving them orange juice.
Yeah, like someone said, the difference between medication and poison is the dosage, right? So you give them the wrong dosage and you essentially poison the person. I don't know anything about that, but I grew up on Wall Street as a teenager. I started there when I was like 16 it was Morgan Guaranty Trust. And then I worked my way, finance degree after finance degree, working through the banking system on Wall Street for 30 years. And then also in that space, I was doing a little bit of information technology. That's what I know.
Yeah.
Finance, economics, information technology. I don't know politicians. I don't know those people that are in power. You're not going to get me to go work at the central bank because I'm not a politician, because I'm not going to do it, right? But the country is not going to go anywhere if you don't call the financial people then, like you guys over here, to come in and I see the comment over here from what's his name saying you cannot mirror the CBL too much to America. True, but Percy said it earlier. What you can do is you can come up with a research arm and be a little bit more innovative. You don't have to follow America.
No, nobody asking you for that either.
Nobody asking. Just bring bankers, economists, financial experts who will set up a data warehouse, who will make decisions based on data and not just based on Sasewu. You can't do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think you asked a great question, Gabriel. And I think Percy gave the best answer. I think the CBL in Liberia is too politicized. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, just to follow up, it is politicized, and that's what you see. And you just gave an example of Patriot, but how about our people, our man, what a different international system? Supposedly, he's an economist. Mel Jones, the guy goes there and he start giving loan to market women there from the central bank in the name of macro loan. I mean, I don't understand these things. This is not how a central bank's supposed to work, and this guy's supposed to know these things. I suppose, right? So when you have Mel Jones, then you take Milton Weeks, and the other guys started to print money, and that's another point. I think that's where I was drawing blank at, right? Because it's this problem with Liberia also about how we manage the money in the economy. The central bank prints our money and manage the money. It's not supposed to be that way. The central bank is a corporate entity for all intents and purposes. No corporation is supposed to be producing a country's national currency. That role is for the central government. It's called Treasury through what we call the Ministry of Finance in Liberia. The legislature is supposed to have a bureau of engraving or whatever you want to call it, where we can produce our money, right? Where our money is readily produced. You can't have the central bank producing money and managing money. You can't have that. You always have this manipulation of the currency as it is, right? There was a story in the central in Front Page Africa that I just stumbled across. Some teller was with, I mean, almost $1 million was sending it to IB Bank or whatever. I mean, I don't know how these things happen in the central bank. I mean, like when you're talking about bro, central bank, I'm like, what kind of country they're talking about? And the problem there is it's not the lack of knowledge, because if you want knowledgeable people, Larry just said he spent 30 years on Wall Street. Gabby and myself are here. We are active professionals in the sectors, right? I don't like to call what I do because that's not what I come here for. But you got people. So the problem is not knowledge anymore, because if you seek knowledge and you're looking for knowledgeable people on these issues, you will find them. And we are plenty out here, right? That have and I'm talking about merit based. Even if you don't want to make people central bank governors and whatnot, but develop an institution wherein people come into the institution and grow. Like Larry said, he started off young. I started off, from the bottom also, and you work your way. So that institutional knowledge that you get is very helpful. So your next central bank governor shouldn't be coming from IB Bank, CB Bank, or whatnot. It should be somebody who you have developed, who came into the system, knows the system, know the idiosyncrasies of Liberia economy, and then you start promoting that person up the ladder. And that's what we do in the United States here. And not miracle. That's exactly what we do. Jerome Powell used to be on the board of governors. When Trump said he didn't want Janet Yellen, they just promoted Jerome Powell. You're not losing nothing there. There's institutional knowledge still in there. So that's what you guys, I mean, I'm just saying, there's so many things that are wrong with it. I don't know. How do you fix it, Larry? I don't know.
That's why I said we can, I think it was Hernando de Soto who said, who argued why capitalism seems to work in the West, but capitalism doesn't seem to work anywhere else. Right, I think it was De Soto who said that, because we see central banks over here in the West, we see central bank over in Europe, we see central bank over in Botswana, but when you look at central bank in Liberia, it's like somebody who said it, like it's like a susu club or something. Everybody will take a little small personal loan. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I think Jimmy Eastman, we talked about it. You're right. Yeah, Mills Jones, and what Percy just said was. he was running for office. And what Gabriel said at the beginning of the conversation, central bank is the lender of last resort, right?
Mhm.
The banks, now, a little bit of history real quick. The Federal Reserve Bank, like what Percy just mentioned, I don't know if people caught on to it, but what he just mentioned is the Federal Reserve Bank is not owned per se by anyone, right? The government actually runs it, but the Federal Reserve Bank, the banks in the district of that Federal
The
Reserve
district,
Bank,
yeah.
they own shares
Yes, yeah.
in that Federal Reserve Bank. Because
Mhm.
when Lehman Brothers failed, I had signing authority of up to about 750 million, almost $750 million. I had to increase JP Morgan's share at the Federal Reserve Bank. And the same thing, right? Because JP Morgan took up a bear stearns, we did a lot of stuff over there. So everybody would increase their share. It's like when you have a store at the mall. Everybody in the mall pays for the common grounds, utilities and all that stuff. So when one store in the mall goes out of business, they
Everybody
increase
chips
the
in.
amount of fees that you have to pay for the lighting and the landscaping. It's the same thing. There are 12 Federal Reserve districts. It starts from 01. When you look at the routing number, the ABA, it starts from 01 in Boston all the way to down to 12, FRB San Francisco, right?
Cisco, yeah.
And then every, 01 Boston, 02 New York, 03 FRB Philly, FRB meetings, so on and so forth. But their own shares in there. Liberia is different. And we understand it doesn't have to be like America because it's a small country. But you have to take the best of what works in different places and incorporate it in your system. You can't have maelstroms running around giving money to market women, call that lending. You can't have the Minister of Finance going out there to the central bank and then sending across his own team saying he's going to do mop up. That's nonsense. And this is why you see that one of the reasons why Liberia keeps going right now is because of the resource curse. We have a lot of resource, so we don't need people who are competent because you will still just lease or lend all of your resources and still get money. But if you didn't have the resources and you don't have the technical people to do this work, then people will run you out of government in no time. So we end up putting people in power who are not very effective at what they do, and this is why we are where we are. So
The
great
question
point,
that
Gabriel.
the other question that I have for you guys, and I think this, in a normal country where people are held to account, this is supposed to be the natural step of progression that's supposed to happen right after this report. I expect that the Senate Finance Committee supposed to call in the central bank governor. Hey, we just got this audit report. Please come and tell us what happened, what went wrong, how did this happen under your watch, and hold him to account in terms of him articulating if he has any plan at all, what they need to do. But we have yet to hear any of those committee, which is the Senate Finance Committee, or even anybody from the senator, any of those senators, call this guy, even though he was suspended, call him or his deputy to really explain as to what happened. Do you think these are some of the mistakes? Because I think what has happened so far is you and I think on social media, people are talking about it. But in terms of any accountability from the Senate Finance Committee or any senator in the country in terms of calling the central bank governor to explain the report, none of that has happened as well. Yeah.
I mean, it's just the lack of let's say it's almost like we're singing the same song. It's just the lack of will on the part of our people. Look, if I'm an accountant by training, from what I just read in that audit report, if you had all those non-compliance in the audit report, there's something. Then the next step is that you start asking this question: are there criminality? Why all these red flags? Why are you guys violating all these regulations and whatnot? A logical person would say, okay, there's just no way that one entity will be breaching all these regulations here at a time. What's the rationale for that? Are people trying to skirt the law so that they can line their pockets? So there should be a deeper dive. So the next phase of this whole thing is supposed to be a forensic audit, because the amount of red flags that's in that audit report is just mind blowing. So the next thing that's supposed to be commissioned is this the GAC is supposed to do a forensic audit where all these money was going, who are authorizing them, all these kinds of stuff, right? So that's the next thing. I don't know. I don't know if who's supposed to order the forensic audit, but the GAC needs to go back. Besides the compliance, they need to go back and do a forensic audit. So now we can answer the hard questions, right? Who their money they were going to, who were authorizing the movement of these monies, the way they were authorizing it. So all these things, so we can find the culprit that was like literally skirting the law and trying to do things illegally, because the laws are there, and just people just decide to flagrantly disregard it. So we need to find out why. So a forensic audit will do you that, right? Then you start to prosecute people, because the difference between Liberia and most countries, I tell people, is deterrence. Right? When you look in Liberia, no big shot goes to jail in Liberia. You try that, and everybody want to politicize everything. If big shots were going to jail in Liberia, like the common people who go that are going to jail, something will stop there. People will stop in their tracks and start thinking, like, okay, if I do the thing, this is my end, right? I don't want to go there. I don't want to lose this, so they will start doing the permutation right away, and they will start to call themselves to order. But absent that, there's no incentive for anybody to do anything, because maybe these guys are in cahoot also. You just saw what happened to the budget. The legislature passed budget, before it reached to the executive, numbers start to change, then they got to bring it back. So this is a syndicate. The central bank was operating as a racket. That's racketeering that was going on there. That's a crime. People should be punished for it.
Yeah. Larry.
Yeah, I think the question is a great question, because I think by now, the Senate should call, whether he's suspended or not, the Senate
should be there talking.
Yeah, he should be there talking right now, because, like what Percy just said, it's not just a syndicate. It's like the Central Bank of La Cosa Nostra, something. Mafia or something. The guys that were running. I mean, it's so blatant, some of the stuff these guys were doing, that I would be concerned, because the U.S. Treasury I think there's this one person in Liberia who is sanctioned as the financier for Hezbollah, right? If you look at the Treasury sanctions list, there's a bunch of people on that list, right? But when besides the oil tankers and all that stuff. But there's an individual, he's on the sanctions list in Liberia. He's also on the sanctions list in Sierra Leone, other countries. And he's flagged as the financier for Hezbollah. Excuse me. Now, I would be concerned when you have money funneling through the central bank. And you see, because the central bank can move money internationally through SWIFT, I would be concerned, because the central bank might even be a pawn in helping to finance terrorists, which is the major concern the U.S. has when it comes to moving U.S. currency around the world. But, I mean, I think to your point, Gabriel, the Senate should have called somebody, specifically the CBL governor, like what Percy just said. He should be out there singing like a bird right now. Find out exactly what's going on. And then the second part to it, bring in a real asset recovery team, because this is the people's money. This money just not out of thin air. It is the people's money. Bring in a true international asset recovery company to collaborate with the local people on the ground. Get a lead lawyer, attorney, to start to follow the money trail.
Yeah.
To follow the money trail. This money needs to be, if it left the country, it needs to be repatriated back to the country. It needs to be clawed back from people who got it illegally. And the U.S. government, Interpol, all these international organizations will cooperate, but you need to bring the people's money back. Find out where this money, people who took out loans and haven't repaid, go ahead, file the claim, seize their assets for repayment of the people's money. But we can't let these kind of things then slide, because I think they're using it to test President Boycott right now to see if he'll pursue the rule of law. They're testing him. But so Gary, to answer your question, people should be in front of the Senate right now singing like Tweety Bird right now. They need to be out there singing.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you, and Actually, to your point, there is an asset recovery team, right? There was an well, there is an asset recovery team that was set up.
Gabriel,
I've never.
like Bati Cody said, you'll probably need
Uh,
an asset recovery team to investigate the current
recover.
asset recovery team, the way they're going.
There's supposed to be an asset recovery team. I agree, absolutely agree with you. That's supposed to be, even if they didn't have anything to jump on, that is a silver platter right in front of them. Perfect example, that audit report. They should have been
But how do
all
you even
over it.
find the asset? Like we talked about these things before. How do you even find the asset? You don't.
You can
We don't
trace it.
record
You can
nothing
trace it.
in. What are you gonna trace, Gabriel?
Let me tell you how we do that. And I'm going to give it to you from a first-hand perspective, not just hearsay, because I was in the middle of it, right? So, President Weah, I don't know whether he was drinking Hennessy X or what he was drinking, but he decided to bring in an international asset recovery team called Grant Thornton. You can look them up. Well known.
I know Grant.
Right. Grant Thornton came in there. Some of the guys who worked with Grant Thornton. There was another team that came in there. These guys are probably retired MI5 British Secret Service people. They were in there. Now, going through, you're not going to be able to catch some of the local stuff, right? But you can catch some of the international stuff because there's an audit trail to every single penny that leaves the central bank because it goes through SWIFT, right? The Society Worldwide Interference. You guys know the whole SWIFT acronym, right?
Yep.
So that money, but we're not talking asset recovery just the regime from 2018 up until now. No, we're talking asset recovery going back 10, 15 years or so, right? A lot of that money is over in the BVI, the British Virgin Islands. So we're not talking just the local people there, the people there who are accused of economic sabotage, like the McGill and all those people there. There's some big fish out there because it's estimated that over $1.2 billion.
Omar in the Panama Papers, right?
It was in the Panama Papers as well.
Yep.
A lot of those things are in the British Virgin Islands, they're over in U.S. banks, they're over in Swiss bank accounts and things like that. Remember, Nigeria managed to repatriate, I think, almost $1 billion from the island nation of Jersey. So people have been through the central bank system. They have downloaded the records. And I was hoping one of my men that I was talking to was going to send me a sample of the records that he downloaded. But SWIFT is not going to necessarily share that information with an asset recovery lawyer. SWIFT is very secretive when it comes to something like that, but they will be willing to cooperate. So, Percy, the way you do that, you would not want to get the CBL records because I don't care what you do, you cannot destroy it because there was another bank on the other side of that.
Yeah, on the other side of the transaction. Yeah.
Exactly. So the other bank, all you need is just the SWIFT account number. You can trace that stuff. But you also bring the US FBI in place. The US FBI, they want that one to cut. So even when Nigeria got the money from Sani Abacha time, the US FBI did get its cut. So you will be able to bring the US FBI and other people in there. But there are billions, hundreds of millions stolen from Nigeria over time and can be found if you bring in a true asset recovery thing. And this is why when Samuel Clinton went after Charles Taylor and had him over in Worcester, Massachusetts, in a maximum security prison, Charles Taylor was saying that he didn't steal any money, they're not going to find it. Well, he had it well hidden. But yeah, I think you can find that money, Percy. You just need people who understand. You need a group of lawyers. You need accountants like yourself who can read financial information. You need forensic accountants. You bring that international team. Yeah, not the thing that we're talking before looking was stop people who stole a car or something like that. That's child's play.
That's why they lost their momentum. The moment you go after somebody with a car, they just tell me you have no idea what you're supposed to do.
But most of the people would be most of the people will probably get implicated if you really get down to the nitty-gritty. Like I said, Omar Nikimo in the Panama paper or shell or thing will wrap up in shells, right? So you start going head with roll, like literally, and I'm talking here figuratively, heads. Like serious BB people name will start to capitulate in our country. You'll not even believe it. Like
and there's money in British accounts that no one is taking ownership for. There are
The
millions.
Oh
Liberian
wow.
go-
Yeah, people not taking ownership for it. Yeah,
the
that,
Liberian government is notorious for losing money because they don't put their case together. They don't research, they don't put their case together. This goes as far back as 1874. They went into a British court to pursue money from E.J. Roy, and they ended up losing the case. Roy's son took the money and went to Australia, and I play he died. Whatever happened to him at the end of the day based on my research. But the Liberian government is notorious. They don't put case together. They're not serious about recovering asset or money that I think they belongs to the country.
but Percy, that was how Emmanuel Shaw, who was finance minister at one time, he was a finance minister, right? Emmanuel Shaw. I think because Emmanuel
I
Shaw,
think so.
yeah,
But you were
Emmanuel
that was
Shaw.
dual time.
I heard the name.
yeah, because he
I
was the
think it
one
was
who
in
ended up
Doe and
suing the
Taylor
Liberian
time.
government. Yeah, he sued the
Yes.
Liberian government and took over the plane.
Okay.
Yeah, the guy
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
allegedly destroyed the financial records, sued the government that he was a part of, and because, like you just said, the government couldn't defend itself in international court, he ended up collecting the Liberia plane as
Stole it.
compensation. Yeah, for default judgment. Yeah, so they don't defend this stuff. So,
No.
but yeah, I
No.
mean, I
Notorious
think
for that.
someone needs to testify before the Senate and let us know what's happening to that money.
But if our men
All
start
right.
talking, plenty other people name from in the present and part government yeah, we get hope on it. So that one let talking. Make
Well,
it do a street code.
you mean Talo if he's
Yeah, our men start
start
talking
talking?
no. Yeah,
Because
people when I
and
see I think high and mighty yeah, no, they will get in snare.
I agree with you, and the reason why I agree with you because of I when I heard about the arrest of those three staff who were at the who
Yeah, they
sent the
went out
money at
moving
the
the money. Yeah.
right. I mean, it just seemed as if it's a case of distraction. There's a lot more that was in that report than those three individuals that is apparently are being arrested for 900,000 when you have cash over almost 2 million. I mean, 200 million over the counter. Money flying everywhere to go into NSA accounts. Nobody know what they're doing with the NSA. I mean, the money, and you just go. You the moment you took over, you went and arrested. Those three individuals for less than 1 million. I'm not saying that's not enough money. That's enough money, but there's a lot more uh, deeper accountability, people you can hold accountable than those three individuals who are, I think, that are just being used as a pawn, in the this whole case.
This
And I think it serves as a distraction because they want us to get away from that and just focus on those three individuals in terms of saying, hey, now you're coming out the new CBL governor. What are you going to do about this report? And I guess that's what he's doing about that report. And I think it's a slap on the wrist. You know.
oh man.
Yeah.
When you talk about
So
central bank, people get headache.
I know.
let's go to the last point here, which is based on what we just talked about. What the central bank's supposed to do compared to what we are doing at the CBR, the Liberian Central Bank, to really make sense of whether I mean it's now it goes without saying that there needs to be an overhaul of not just the central bank but our own financial system, which I think some of you guys been alluding to as well. So right now we're cashing checks over the counter, which technically is not supposed to be done. uh, we're directly lending to individual. We lack regulatory control, hence the uh, arch regulator, the guy they brought in as compliant guy who is failing in compliance. It doesn't focus. Our central bank does not focus on employment at all. It never has, and I don't think it. Hopefully somebody will come in and change that in terms of really focusing on creating jobs. And again, they have a fixed exchange rate strategy, which most central banks don't. But that the last part, I don't want to beat them so much on it. Where if you look at other central banks, they're the lender of last resort. They have financial stability. There's a control of credit, monetary, everything that we've talked about. My last question to both of you is either based on these things, the difference between these two, uh, you know, what the central bank is doing in Liberia right now compared to what central bank's supposed to do, and also knowing what happened in the audit report. What do you think would be your recommendation if you were to be picked as the central bank governor right now, or if you were to come in as the president? What would be your strategy in terms of resolving some of these things that just took place, or even going back to since the we came out of the war? That's a lot of hat to wear, but I would throw that on both of you. I want to pick your brains. Percy.
Um, if I was the president, I'll be looking for institutional knowledge of the entity. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? It would be it would take a lot for me to go out and get somebody else from outside. But in this case, in Liberia case, given the current crop of people that at the helm of the central bank, I might have to, right? But I'll be looking for people who have institutional knowledge. One, two, I would endeavor to make the central bank like the research and development of policy tools. I will make that a top priority. That's
Mhm.
very important. That brings credit. There's a reason why when people go to the Federal Reserve website, or when the Federal Reserve, well, anybody from the Fed talk is cover is there's a lot of coverage for that. There's a reason for that, because it's very important. The information that comes from the central bank it can steer the economy either up or down. It can make investors to move their money out of the way. So it's very important. So you want the central bank to be a credible entity. That's one of the reasons you want to really enhance your research and your development arm of the central bank, right? Get it covered to the T, so that when information come from there, people can readily rely upon it. There can be no second guessing of the data, because it has been vetted. The people that are doing it are competent, technical people. No political business there, so they're just doing numbers crunching. Basically, that's what it is. That's one. Two, um, yeah, I still want to fix that tenure thing on the central bank governorship or the board of directors. I really do believe you need to extend it beyond the 5 years to take away the temptation of just coming in and removing the central bank governor. But I also want to like decentralize the central bank. I think we should. I know people say we don't have to reinvent the wheels. Like, we don't have to be like America. True, there's no way like Liberia can be in America, but I think you need to decentralize the central bank activity, so that if ever it comes to the point wherein we start to develop monetary policy that impact the economy, so it doesn't only have to be for Monrovia, it have to be for the broader country. People have to feel
How
the
will you
effect
do
of.
that, and how many subdivisions will you create? Would you create
For
one
me,
in each county, or would you do
no,
four
no, no, no. I want to divide the
regional?
country into three, right? You divide the country into three. You got middle, you got east, you got the east, you got the middle of the country, and you got the western part of the country. Now,
Right,
you select an economic hub for one of
right.
those places in each one of the places. So for the eastern part of the country, I would take Maryland. Maryland have some sort of some minimal infrastructure and whatnot. So I would take Maryland and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And then you take the middle of the country. You can either do Ganta or Banga, which one of these countries
place
in
one
the
there.
middle.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can take one of them and stuff. But then on the west, I mean, on the western side, because you're still gonna have the Central Bank of Liberia. This is where the board of directors gonna reside, and all those people. Then they're
yeah,
still
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be there. But then you want to decentralize. You want to have satellites in these various places, so that when it comes to implementing monetary policy, those other satellites can be able to like carry out the mandate of the CBL in a reputable, reasonable way, so that it impact the economy in those local counties, as opposed to just Monrovia, right? So you want people, you want that's what we talk. I think they call it financial inclusion, whatever you want to call it. That be what they can use for it. But you want to decentralize the country, so that you take away just the Monrovia centric kind of decision making process
Yeah,
that
what
we have
happens right now?
also.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are a couple of pillars that I would consider if and when. But I don't think I'll be ever doing that anytime in this lifetime. So, but yeah.
Okay. Larry,
Um,
if you were to be placed in the as the either the governor of the central bank right now, or if you were to come in as the president, what would you want to fix in the system, or how would you want to go about um, doing that fixing?
Yeah, so I think I will have a 3-step strategy. The first thing you need to do is something that is basic in any environment. I mean, information is the basis for decision making.
Okay.
What that means is you need to collect data. You need to set up data warehouse. You need to set up institutions where people, like right now, if I'm interested in seeing the unemployment rate in Liberia, you have to go rely on the World Bank.
Yep.
And the World Bank is using estimates. It's not real hard numbers. In
Yep.
the US, you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So you have statisticians who are crunching the numbers. They are doing surveys. They are pulling the numbers in. They're looking at employment statistics. You can't fix
payrolls also.
payroll. They're looking
Yeah.
at, unemployment claims.
Yeah.
You can't fix the Liberian economy if you don't have data, and data is just the raw facts. You can't refute the data. But when you take that data and you turn it into something that you can use to make decisions, it then becomes intelligence. It becomes information. So I would set up these data warehouses and data hubs and put people with economic and financial background in there to crunch the numbers. Let them run their regression analysis, do all of these statistics, and then present over to the governor of the central bank their financial and economic forecast. So that's the first thing you want. You want hardcore data. You can get support from the World Bank, the IMF, even the US Federal Reserve System to set up that true data hub.
Yeah.
I know that ListGIS, the Liberia Institute for Statistical Geo something, was meant to do that.
Yeah.
But ListGIS have been politicized. They're not doing what their function is meant to do. So I would re-engineer that whole group, right? That's the first thing I want to do. Need to make sure the financial system, the banks, are properly regulated. You got to bring trust back into the system. So if Percy goes and he deposits 25,000, no, Percy that big time player. If Percy deposits 100,000 over in the bank, like the way he rolls, Percy needs to be able to come back next week and be able to tap into his money.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in Liberia because they are playing sort of like I don't want to say a Ponzi scheme or like a hot potato, or yeah. So they're going to take Percy's money to pay somebody off who needs their money right away and who's been waiting for about a week. And that's not how you run a financial system. You got to put trust in the system. I know some people will say, "Oh, that's not how it is in Liberia." No, it still exists. You need to put trust in the financial sector. You also need to get Liberia's credit rating fixed. You can't tap, and you, Gabriel, I see your post all the time how different countries are tapping the sovereign debt market to raise capital. Liberia can't do that because you look at the countries in ECOWAS, I think there's only 4 countries that have credit rating amongst all those countries. So you need to be able to tap that. So you got to work on the credit ratings, which is a huge thing to tap sovereign debt. But the last thing I would do is I would try to create a strong relationship with the Liberians in the diaspora. Because when we think about foreign direct investments, we keep looking at the white man to come in and rescue us because if the white company that was foreign direct investment can also be Gabriel interested in setting up do something financial in Liberia. So I would appeal to Liberians in the diaspora. Because Liberians in the diaspora, we have a huge number of Liberians in the diaspora with capital, investment money that we need to entice to come and invest in Liberia. But they're not going to do it if they don't trust the banking system. So it goes back to what I said, financial regulation, make sure people who are gaming the system are caught and prosecuted, money's clawed back. Make sure you have people who can make financial and economic prediction based on data, and you can't get the data unless you have a data hub. So those are the things then you need to start working on right away. But again, here's the cincher right here. Gabriel, Percy, none of this stuff is going to work if you can't enforce the rule of law.
Nope.
If people can still game the system and you can prosecute them, then you're wasting everybody's time. Because people will always do something to try to take advantage of the system if they know they're not going to be prosecuted. So
Yeah.
regulation is the last thing. Maybe it should be the first, but I want to make sure that you have regulation and enforcement of those rules. So those are the kind of things that right off the top, the CBL governor, you hit the ground running. Those are the things you chase it. And then, you'll be able to lead to the other things that we talk about, stability, inflation, job creation, all those other things that the CBL should be doing.
Yeah, thank you. There's a part you touched up on, and I just wanted to add. So in December last year, there was I think there was two meetings hosted by Moody's. One was specifically on South Africa. They were looking at their financial system and their insurance system. The other one of that was some African heads of states, and also those that work in the financial industry in those African countries. Their qualm was that the way Moody's and these other three rating agency rates the African country are unfair. And so they took that fight to, I think it was Moody's. Out of that conversation in December came what's happening right now. So the AU is actually, you might laugh at that because we know everything the AU does is, they just, it at the beginning, it sounds very good, but, they never follow up on it. So out of that conference in December came what is now being touted as a credit rating system for Africa that the AU is trying to push. Yeah, exactly. Right. So they're trying to create their own credit rating system that will rate, companies and countries on the continent. Right. The, you know, I don't know if anybody in Liberia is aware of that, but that is something they're trying to do right now to fix that. And to their point too, there's a little bit of evidence there. So if you look at how those countries are rated, right, and what some of those financial institutions on the continent, how they're rated. So usually because those banks on the continent directly borrow from the government. So if they are being rated, their credit rating almost directly mirrors what the country credit rating is, and those guys made a lot of fight about that. But right now, that's what's happening on the credit market. So AU is trying to set up its own credit rating system for the continent, so that way, so maybe this is something Liberia can tap into, since we can do the harder thing to go get our credit fixed. Maybe we can take the backdoor method with the AU and get it fixed too. Hopefully go on the credit market. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to add that on there.
Well, you gotta start with credible budgets, right? I mean, you gotta start from there. Your budget. The reason why they get rid of shabby ways, one is someone. I mean, you so in the United States, for example, when Moody's and S&P and Fitch, when they do the ratings and stuff of I mean, just on the sovereign side, right? They look at the financial data for the government, right? And and they look at the financial profile of the government. Based on that, that's where they base their rating off of, in terms of the sovereign debt rating of that country, right? If you take a country like Liberia, you bring Moody's here, we can't even account for how much we owe locally before we talk about foreign and how much we owe, right? The budget before it reach to the executive, the people they already switching number there. So you got to start from the people. You can't crowd foul. Oh, the people not rating us well because they're rating where people well and whatnot. Okay, try to make things even. Do the leg work, and then when you see, then you can crowd foul after you have done the leg work. But you can't be having this kind of dismal record, like no record keeping to at some point, right? And then you want these people to give you the same rating they're giving other countries that have done the lead work, that have done the documentation, whose national government have prioritized identification as a national thing to do. I mean, you can't be crying foul for that, because those are the rudimentaries that people are going to use to rate your debt, right? And to the extent that you don't do that, I mean, there's a lot of work yet to be done. It can be done, you have to have the right people, the right mindset, the right technocrat to do that, and then we can come and say, oh yeah, yeah. But we and the people we did everything, and we and the people get a same amount of thing going on, but you're giving this, and then that's a fair thing. But you can't be in the kind of, you still don't know who you owe locally. Locally, let's forget about international people. Locally, you know your domestic debt. You don't know who all you owe. People that are popping up from nowhere. Then you say you want to get a scene rating. I don't know if the AU thing is going to work because that would require some sort of conformity and uniformity on the continent. And I don't know. You didn't try it. I don't know, but hopefully. But what I think is you can start locally. We can start with our own local credit agency, credit rating agency, right? That will do the research and whatnot, and then put a framework in place because Moody's of S&P or whoever, they're not coming in to come reinvent the wheel. They're going to feed off of what you already have and build off of that system that you already put in place, right? They're just going to amplify it and make it more rigor, make the data, the scrutiny more rigor, so that because based on international standard, but you have to start locally. To think you can just do a whole continental thing and everybody's supposed to ascribe to it. Liberia people can't even know who we owe in Liberia. Then you come and do AU thing here. I don't understand.
Yeah. So, Larry, you have any comment?
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why you need a good data warehouse to collect this kind of data. Because how can you not know your domestic debt? It's just ridiculous. But I remember Gabriel had asked Bwana Kamara this question about sovereign ratings when Bwana Kamara appeared on FOL. And he stated that they were working on it at the time when he was the finance minister under Ellen. They were working on it, but he never got to see it through. But he didn't clearly explain why he never saw it through. Because part of the reason why your rating is impacted is also because you can't be having all these budget shortfalls.
Yeah.
You can't be having this sort of deficit we've seen. Your trade balance. You can't be having all those things there because they're looking for stability. They're looking at the enforcement of the rule of law. They're looking at a whole lot of intangibles as well as tangibles. But Gabriel asked him that question. He said they started working on it, but they didn't want to do the heavy lifting, and I think that's where they dropped the ball. But credit rating agencies, we're not saying they're sort of like the holy grail, because if the credit rating agencies were so honest and up, we weren't going to have the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act that came about in 2010, because it was a result of a lot of the credit rating agencies and some of these other agencies fooling around with the ratings of some of the bond ratings. Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Because they were getting paid by those people, Larry. So.
They were getting kickbacks. So we know that, even the whole LIBOR thing is went apart, the London interbank offering rate, because banks over there in Europe were fooling around with the rates that a lot of mortgages in this country are used when you have like an adjustable rate or something. They use the LIBOR to influence that rate. And we know LIBOR is being manipulated by UBS and some other banks, JP Morgan, all these guys were influencing it. But you got to start somewhere, right? So, but you need a sovereign debt rating in order to stop leasing your resources. But if you're going to borrow money, don't use it for all recurrent expenditures, because then you're wasting everybody's time. You put yourself in more debt. But anyway, it's Liberia, man. Like Percy said, you need to take like 4 Tylenols and hope for the best.
Well, guys, I think this was a great conversation. This is part 1. Part 2, which next Saturday, I want us to look at just solely on the regulatory side of this whole aspect, because I think that's where the bulk of the compliance issue lies. So I want to look at that connection. I want us to look at that connection between the central banks and the commercial bank, as to why the central bank wasn't leveraging the commercial bank, but they were cashing checks over the window. So I want us to, which I think is
that
the
is
bulk
weird.
part of this,
That is really weird.
which I think is the bulk part of that that audit report. So next week we're going to do part two on it. But this was a great conversation.
So
Let me
but
get
just
your fun.
before you go, how
Yeah,
does the central bank make money? Because the bank is supposed to be literally offering those services to the commercial bank and they'll pay for it. And that's how part of the revenue stream is supposed to come in. So if you're doing what supposed to bring money into you from the bank, because I just don't understand. Like,
yeah. Yeah,
ah,
so we're gonna dive into that next week. I think it's the what I call the meat that we're leaving on the bone for that whole audit report. I think there's a lot to talk about on that aspect of it because I think that's where the whole entirety of the audit focus on. So we're gonna get into that next week. But before we adjourn, I want to hear maybe get your closing comment in terms of uh, what we talked about today. What do you think, based on what we talked about, what do you think the audience should leave away with about this whole discussion? And you can go from any angle you
Say
want
it
to go.
again. I think I missed part of the question.
So what do you think the audience should leave away to take away from this discussion we've had? And you can go from either angle that you want to go from. 'Cause I know we talked about a lot of things, but what do you think of somebody who listened to us for the last almost 2 hours? What do you think they should take away from this conversation? Whether it's be somebody in the government or anybody who is just curious about the entire topic.
Great question. You want to go first, Percy?
Percy.
take it, Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Larry.
So, yes, what I think anyone who watched this show should walk away with, right? The central bank or central banks, the concept of central bank, the central bank is like one of the most, I will put it right up there with the executive as being one of the most important institutions in the country because they're the ones responsible for creating employment through their policies. They're responsible for making sure you don't have very high inflation. Inflation is like a poor man's tax, right? When you see prices of rice, palm oil, anything on the market, when you see prices then rising like that, that's a tax on the poor people because the poor people's salary is not rising at the same rate. The central bank is meant to have policies to make sure prices are not skyrocketing. They're relatively low, right? So the central bank is also responsible for making sure that the other banks are solvent, meaning if I put my money in the bank today, I can come next week and I can get that money. So it's managing those banks. It's kind of funny that when you look at some of the, there's a lot of foreign banks, sub-Saharan banks in Liberia. Yeah, I think Liberia might have one or two banks that they actually own or have investments by Liberians. But the funny thing is when you go and you look at the financial statements of those banks, when they operate, they are doing extremely well. So what happens that when they go to Liberia, they will operate, people can get the money in some instances and it seems to be all shady. So something with the financial regulation. Look, the central bank is very powerful, but the central bank has to be used the way it should be used, right?
Yeah.
So the central bank is being used in such a corrupt way that we need to rethink the whole dynamics of central bank when it comes to Liberia. But I know we have time, so I'll just cut it short and say, we need to redefine the central bank of Liberia.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Percy.
I mean, I've laid my vision for the central bank out, right? I will go over. Larry just said it, right? You need to you need to rethink the whole central bank needs to be revamped from the bottom up, right? You need to take away the political incentive that is there currently. I really do think you need to take that away so that you don't have these abnormal things going on at the central bank. And it's not just the current group, but pulling back as far as Mills Jones, Weeks, Petrie, and now Talu. I think you need to revamp those things, and you need to vet people who goes in there. Like that's like you can't overemphasize the importance of the central bank. Like the reason you get money, how you get money in your pocket, the amount of money you get in your pocket, everything, that's the central bank responsible for that, right? If to the extent that they don't, the institution responsible for that particular society economics is not functioning well, it's a problem. We're gonna have a problem. What do you do in a let's say we have inflation right now. What the central bank is gonna do? right? You're gonna send people in the street to start mopping up again. Is that's what I mean? You can't do that. You have to think about these things logically. And again, the problem there is not the lack of knowledge. It's not that our people don't know, because we have competent people around the world, people that work in these financial institutions, people who know how things supposed to work. It's just that our leaders are not looking for those people, because they are not politically involved, or they will not bend to the whims and caprices of the political leaders of the day. So they probably don't want to do that. They would take somebody who's not, they know him well, that person is not capable or qualified to run a central bank, especially in a post-war country like Liberia, with all the challenges that we have, and just throw them there. I think this is what the old man is doing, right? I really do think this is what he's doing. He's not doing it because he wants Talu, or Talu did so much wrong. Yeah, Talu was not even supposed to be around central bank in the first place. But have we vetted the current guy? What's his record from IB Bank? Like, what did he do there? Like, you know what I mean? There is a current board of governors that was also appointed. I don't know if you guys know. I don't know if they're
There's three of
acting or
them
what. So
so far.
what happened to the current, the previous one that were there? They turn you over also. That would bring in these new ones in. You know, who vetting these people? Are they going for? I mean, did they go for? Are they going for confirmation so that we can hear what they got to offer? You know what I mean? So this is a serious entity, and you have to treat it as such. It can't be like this political football. The central bank is not one of the. You can make mistake with your taxes and why not and correct it later on, right? But if you can't make the kind of mistake we're making with the central bank, it's so important to everyday life that you can't play with it to the extent that you play with it so often. The country itself is going to be messed up as it is. So you have to fix these things. You have to think about it conceptually, and then you have to think about it practically, how it makes sense, how it's going to work for us as a country. But to just leave it there and have, because everything like bro is political, and just leave it there and just politicize everything. I mean, the country is not going to go anywhere. You need to bring people like Larry in. I don't know why they won't call Larry.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
and because
later,
the reason, if you get people like Larry in them, because Larry will be looking for professional people. It's like, Gabby, I need to come. Maybe I'm going to be something, but you can't run my research and development, can't run operate. You'll be looking for competent people, and, you know, because he himself is competent. He will be looking for competent people who can actually do the job based on
yeah.
merits, right? So that's why you need people like that in there. You can make these things up. But yeah, nice show. I'm sorry I came late. Like I told you, you know my problem, Gabby.
Larry, thank you guys for. I absolutely share your belief as well, Percy. I think, and I know he's trying to shy away from it, but I think these are the people that, like, people like Larry are people that they're supposed to be looking at to, come plug in there. I know maybe the way he probably will, clean up. They will not like that kind of cleanup. So
Nope.
But it's good.
I think
It's good for the country. It's not about the individual. It's
you
about the
bring
country.
somebody
It's
like
about
Larry that you
patriotism.
would
They
you
would
would
run
you
me
would
out of town.
what Trump would say, you drain the swamp.
Yeah, yeah. The
You
people,
drain
the
you
people are
drain the
benefiting
swamp.
from the system being corrupt. They don't want to change it.
Yep.
Yeah. But great show, gentlemen, and thank you guys for taking the time. As I said,
Yeah,
next week we're gonna do a deeper dive in the regulatory part. Thank you for sharing. I think this was a great show. As we always say here,
You didn't read our comments though. You don't be doing justice to these
yeah, I
people
know.
at
Man,
least,
we're
because
out of time.
this show is a niche show, and a few group of it don't carry the same amount of, because it's not politically
Yeah,
explosive.
we'll do
So you
that. We'll
have
do that.
that mostly
Let's
nerds
make
and
this
people then who really
promise.
want to learn. So you know what I mean.
yeah.
You gotta keep them
Let's
This show
make
engaged.
is
this
fine the
promise.
way it is.
Yeah, we'll do that next week. We'll definitely read the comment. And for those of you that had comments, we apologize that we couldn't read because we're out of time right now. 2 hours is a lot of time, but we promise we will sneak in time next week to read your comments. As we always say here, regardless of what you think,
Okay.
we're all Liberians, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your weekend and see you here next week at the same time.
All right.
Adios.
All right.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Bye.
Thanks, Percy.
All
All right. Bye bye.
right.
Bye, guys. And let me close this show right now.
We all Liberians.